Welcome all to Future of Web Design New York. It's good to see you all here. My name is Paul Boag. I am, for the sake of this conference, I am Ryan Carson. I lack the hat. I apologise for that. But Ryan, at the moment, is producing a baby. Obviously not personally. I believe that his wife is in some way involved. But apparently that's more important than being here with you lot. So yeah, I make of that what you will, really. I think that shows a lack of commitment on Ryan's part. I mean, why he needs to be there at the birth of his own child is quite beyond me, but there you go. So, hello and welcome to Future Web Design. It's great to have you all here. Thank you for turning up, and I'm sure you're really going to enjoy the next few days. We've got some absolutely stunning speakers lined up. Slightly different format this year. We've got 2 tracks on 2 separate stages, so you're actually going to have to move around and do things which will keep you entertained and busy. I also want to do a big thanks to the sponsors that mean that your prices are kept lower, because obviously these things get expensive. We've got some great sponsors here. We've got Squarespace. So the guys from Squarespace here? Okay, now the reason I asked whether they're here is because last night they came to the speakers' dinner and said they couldn't be asked to get up this morning. So I said if they didn't turn up, I'd slag them off. So Squarespace is absolutely rubbish. Don't have anything to do with them whatsoever. Okay, our second sponsor is MailChimp, and I know MailChimp are here, and they're great guys. Go and look at MailChimp. Just ignore Squarespace. And another people you want to check out is fonts.com. They're really good. Again, ignore Squarespace. And then finally, I also wanted to mention Expression and Mix Online. Thank you to all of those sponsors. We do really appreciate their support. Okay, also, just so you know, if you're a Goala user, check in. It's worth checking in while you're here because you get a chance of winning an iPad. You've probably got 3 or 4 of them anyway, but another one to prop open a door is always good. So make sure you check in via Goala. We're also, I don't know whether you knew this, but we're also hosting the finals of the Web Font Awards tomorrow. So if you want to know any more about that, go and check out the fonts.com guys outside in the lobby, and they'll tell you a little bit more about that. That's going to be a lot of fun. I've got a feeling that could be quite amusing. Have you already tried to get on the Wi-Fi? Have you succeeded? Oh, mixed response there. Well, as you know, Wi-Fi at conferences is always a little bit tricky. We've actually doubled the bandwidth this year just to make entirely sure you can all get on. But here's the problem. We now have about 25 devices each that we all try and get on the network at the same time. So instead of getting your iPhone, your iPad, your netbook, your laptop all on at the same time, can we just keep it to 1 device each? Is that an unreasonable request? I'm not quite sure. So 1 device each, please. The final little bit of housekeeping I wanted to know. For reasons that escape me, there's a photo booth outside. Why? I don't know. But apparently there is one out there. You can use it for free. See the bonuses you get when you come to Future Web Design? You get a free photo booth. So what I've heard is that the speakers love being dragged into the photo booth with you to have their photographs taken. They're lining up. Sarah Parmenter in particular would like to have her photograph taken with you. So there you go. So use the photo booth. And talking to speakers, let's kick off with our first speaker, who I've heard this guy speak before. He is absolutely incredible, and it will be a really inspiring start to this conference, and I'm sure you're going to go away really enthused to take a different approach with your design. And our first speaker is Aarron Walter from MailChimp, so give him a massive round of applause.
Thanks, Paul.
Good stuff. Go for it.
All right. How about a round of applause for Paul, huh? Quite an MC, huh? It's a great crowd. I got to tell you guys, backstage, it took a lot of discipline to not come out here with some of the props back there, like chicken and pitchfork and stuff. It's just kind of like a toy chest of jokes back there. But so I want to talk to you guys about something that I find really interesting and inspiring. I know that a lot of times we get really focused on the ins and outs of how we build and design things, but sometimes it's nice to take a step back and look at where we are in history, what's happening, and how we can potentially change what's happening in our culture around the world today. I want to talk to you about designing for emotion and this change that is happening right now. Let's see if my clicker will work for me. So I'm going to take you back just 100 years, about 100 years ago, a little over. That time there was a revolution happening, and it was the machine revolution. That the machine was coming up, the industrial age was beginning. New York, of course, was the center of that, a big part of that. And that sort of freaked a lot of people out, and there was a backlash to that because people were concerned about losing their humanity amongst the machine. And there was the arts and crafts movement that was sort of the foil to that. If you're familiar with art history at all, we can go to MoMA and see some of this stuff. And I see that sort of thing happening right now, that we've spent a lot of time, you know, as the web kind of rises up and these corporations have a much broader visible presence, that it's a very, traditionally a very inhuman presence. And there's starting to be a bit of a backlash to that. And people are starting to rethink the way that they shape their brand and communicate with their customers. I think that that relates to one particular thing that's happening, and that is the rise of social networks. Now, I know that the topic of social networking is sort of, it's been the darling for the past 5 years, and I feel like at this point the shine on this conversation is sort of wearing off a bit. But this is not real data. This is all pseudo, you know, scientific chart junk that just supports my hypothesis here. But so bear with me on my theory here. But basically, what's happened is, if you built a portfolio, did anyone build a portfolio around 1998, 1999? Yes, a few of you. All right, nice. Chances are the way you wrote your copy was third person. You were basically saying "we" when it was just you sitting in your bedroom with Dreamweaver, right? You go to a party and, you know, you sort of kind of pump yourself up as a company or a group during the dot-com bubble, that we were trying to make ourselves more than just an individual, because that wasn't enough. But what's happened is, as we start to merge our public and our private profile with the rest of the world, that sort of falls to the background, and now we want to communicate as individuals. In fact, that's more desirable. As we've made that shift in our privacy, we expect the same thing from the products and services that we use on the web. So I want to talk to you about this and share with you some examples of how that's playing out in interface design and how that may change the way you think about interface design. But first I want to talk to you about us, just from an anthropological perspective of who we are as human beings and how we work. Because that helps us understand how we can tap into this human side of who we are, to tap into these emotions that create a much stronger relationship with your audience. There was this guy in the 1950s, Abraham Maslow, who came up with a really simple model for understanding humans. And this model basically boils us down to a collection of needs, the things that we need to survive, and not just survive, but to actually feel fulfilled in our life. That we basically, we need our physiological needs met. We need to eat, sleep, answer the call of nature. We need to feel safe, that someone's not going to rob us and kill us or take our job away or something. We need to feel a sense of belonging and love, the feeling that we get from our families, the thing that we have today as we come together in this group of, you know, we're birds of a feather, we've got similar interests, and we get to mingle with each other at parties and so forth and share ideas. Then that helps us build a sense of place, of self-esteem, of who we are among this bigger group. And then ultimately, we want a sense of self-actualization, that we can do something that's bigger than us, that we can contribute to, you know, the greater good, to human history, have a legacy, that sort of thing. So I found that pretty interesting, and I think that we could map that over to the things that we do on a regular basis, and maybe understand how we relate to computers, interfaces, Because a lot of people, they don't like interacting with computers. They fight them. It's an adversary to be overcome and conquered. They're not like us. We love computers. We love the opportunity to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go jump on your computer first thing. I know that's what I do. I don't know what that says about me, but... So here's how I think this maps over to what we do on a regular basis. That we build websites and applications that are, at first, they have to be functional. They have to do something. They have to serve a purpose for our audience. They have to be reliable. People can count on them. The service isn't going to go down. You know, there are lots of great services out there, and when you know, if we lose Twitter, if we lose Flickr, or whatever, we sort of throw a little hissy fit and not sure how to function. Luckily, those are all stabilized. We need our interfaces to be usable, that we can figure out how to use them and remember how to use them, perform basic tasks quickly and efficiently. But the thing that we often forget is that top layer, which is the pleasure, the delight, the joy of interacting with an interface, that this is something that's missing. And in the arts and crafts movement, you know, that there's this famous quote from William Morris, who's a big part of the arts and crafts movement, that you should not have anything in your house that is not beautiful or useful. And I feel like we could adopt that same mantra in what we do on a regular basis, that it's great that we can make things that's useful, but could we make it more than, you know, beautiful, that we could make it enjoyable, that it could be something that people could fall in love with. I think that's possible. So I think that up until this point, we've really set the bar very low for ourselves, just trying to make things usable. I think that trying to design usable interfaces is a bit like a chef trying to create edible food. Great, it's edible. You know, you don't go to a restaurant to get your daily dose of vitamin C. I mean, sure, that's a nice outcome, but you want something more than that. You want an incredible experience from a you know, fine restaurant. Totally usable, right? Spam? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, a few courageous people raising their hands. You can get what you need. This will survive a nuclear holocaust, and when you're in your bunker, you can crack this open, get the protein you need to make it till tomorrow. Totally usable, but really what we'd like as humans is something a little bit more like this. We want something a little more artisanal, that takes into consideration all of the things that come together to create a great experience, which is, you know, things like texture, freshness, color, the presentation. So it's something that we should be doing in our day-to-day work designing interfaces. So I want to show you the equivalent of where we've been and where we're going. So this is a fantastically usable, wonderful interface. Basecamp, anyone? Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you guys use Basecamp on a regular basis. We've learned a lot from 37 Signals, the methodologies about keeping things simple, iterating quickly, and creating a very useful, simple interface. Now, if you've used Basecamp, you know that it does have shortcomings upon occasion. There are some weird quirks and so forth, but it's very Spartan. It's all about getting a task done, and it gets us up to that usable point in that pyramid, but it doesn't take us any further. And now I think we can start thinking beyond that, because we've got a solid base of user-centered design. We understand that stuff. That's in our workflow day to day. How do we make something pleasurable? Well, Wufoo is an interesting foil that does something pretty incredible in that it injects a personality into the application. So Wufoo, if you're not familiar with it, it's a web application that is, it helps people build forms, and what you're actually doing is building a database that, you know, these forms connect to. So creating databases and forms, that's a really nerdy thing that most real, regular people that are not technical like us, they would be intimidated by that. But Wufoo, with this personality that sort of creates a sense of fun, it feels like Fisher-Price, really. Intentionally feels like Fisher-Price. There's a lot of fun and whimsy that's built into this, this interface that makes it less intimidating, that makes it pleasurable. But the key here, the difference, is personality. And personality, we know in our day-to-day life, is such an important part of what we do throughout the day. that our personality is a collection of behaviors and emotions unique to all of us. It's actually, personality is biological to a certain degree. How well we can empathize relates to the shape of our frontal lobe. There's a lot of biology behind this, and that's why we're all different, because we come in different shapes and sizes. But personality is the way that we connect with one another. It's the platform for emotion. It's the way that we feel. Emotion is a really essential thing. I think that we've spent the last 100 years in psychology and in culture really trying to downplay emotion in our life, because we're trying to deny human nature. That we try to think that, well, we're not animals, we're above that, we're logical, and we think our way through the world. That's true, but in reality, every decision you make on a day-to-day basis, the shirt that you have on right now was chosen because of emotion. And the reason why we know that is because people with damaged brains that have a problem connecting their cerebral cortex to the areas of their brain where emotion is, the limbic center, which is the limbic system, which is the center of emotion, they can't pick a shirt. They can't choose a job. They can't, buy cereal, because they can't rely on emotion, which is the gut instinct that allows us to make choices. So think about that. Like when you're working on a website that's about conversion, that's about signups, that's all gut. That's all your audience having a gut reaction to the interface that you're designing, and that's emotion. So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to think about the things that you're designing as people. That products, services, websites, they're people too. And when we think about that, when we create a personality for our interfaces, we create these hooks. It's sort of like an emotional API for our audience to hook into and relate to. Now, there's some danger in creating a personality for a brand. Namely that, there are some personalities you're not going to like and you're going to conflict with. But I'll tell you more about why that risk is worth it in just a minute. A little bit more about our firmware, the firmware that's built into our brains that we ship with. We all have firmware built in. There's this thing called Gestalt, that as human beings, we do this thing where we look at patterns, we see the world, and we recognize patterns, and our brains boil down everything to the simplest thing. We're looking for contrast. What's different? This thing is different than the other thing, because this contrast is, so it's visual contrast is what we think of in design, but also cognitive contrast of this experience is different than that experience. And what we're doing is we're measuring a cost-benefit analysis. We're trying to say, is this thing good for me or is it bad for me? Is it going to hurt me or not? And by the way, guys, this is why cable news is so hugely popular, because you can boil something down to a simple soundbite, and our brains, this whole Gestalt pattern mapping thing, you can basically pick that up and recognize it right away, plants in your brain, then you can go share that meme with everybody else that you see at work, on the street, whatever. So it's sort of a sad fact of why cable news works. In biology, in nature, we see contrast. So zebras use contrast in a very interesting way. They have high contrast hides that when they're alone, you really see them well, but when they're in a herd like this, it's really hard to pick out an individual. So they introduce a lot of noise and decrease the signal, because if they're caught alone, they can be captured by a predator. And so this is sort of like an evolutionary thing to keep them alive. Humans use this sort of thing as well. In fact, I live in Athens, Georgia, and I work a couple days a week in Atlanta. I drive in, and so I do a fair bit of commuting, and I do some strategizing about where I can speed and how I can speed and get away with it. I will admit it's not worked so well for me the past couple months, because I've gotten a couple speeding tickets. So take this strategy with a grain of salt. But you can do the same sort of thing as with zebras, where you can speed in packs, and it's harder for the cops to find you. It sucks, though, if you're the last guy, because then you're sort of the one that's picked off from the pack. But interesting strategies you can use, because there are predators out there that will get you, as I have seen firsthand. So I want to tie all of this into, use this firmware stuff and tie that into emotion and how we use that in design. A little bit more about us, that the first thing we do when we're born is emote. You cry, you yell, you say, I need something right now. So emotion is basically the way that we communicate with one another and say, I need something from you. So there's this sort of chemical cycle that happens in an infant's brain, and it happens in adult brains too. It's just throughout humanity, throughout your life cycle. So an infant will emote, and there's sort of like one neurotransmitter that raises up that says, I'm uncomfortable, I'm hungry, I'm wet, I'm cold, whatever. And then the caregiver comes in, takes care of that child. That neurotransmitter level goes down and bathes the brain in positive neurotransmitters that just feel good and sort of warm and fuzzy. That's a pretty interesting thing that we can use as a hack into our users' brains. We can actually bathe our users' brains in the right neurotransmitters that builds a bond. So this cycle that happens with infants and children is what helps infants bond with their parent. That's why adoption, why you can take a child that's not biologically yours, and they can feel like you are their mother or father, because of this cycle that happens over and over again, where there's this bond of trust. So we can do the exact same thing with brands, products, services, the websites we build. If we create these emotional cycles with users where they start to trust us more than other brands. So I want to introduce to you this principle, this emotional design principle, which essentially it states that people are going to forgive your shortcomings. They're going to follow your lead and sing your praises if you reward them with positive emotion. So it's going to act as an ace in a hole when something goes wrong, that people will trust you even when a service goes down, a site goes down, you lost some data, something wasn't quite usable. They're going to actually evangelize for you because you've given them something that other people cannot. You've given them this emotional reward. So an example here of the Volkswagen Bug. When I was a kid, I was 3 years old, and my mom would drive me to preschool in this car, not this exact car, but it was red, and it didn't have the luggage rack. It had no heater. It had no radio. It had no air conditioner. I grew up in Iowa. It was really cold in the winter. And I froze my butt off, but I loved getting up in the morning, getting in that car with my mom and riding to school. We'd sing songs, and the reason why I liked it so much was because when I saw that car, I saw a face. It's a smiley face. It's two eyes and a big smile. It's Herbie the Love Bug. There's a certain anthropomorphization of the Volkswagen Beetle that is a big part of why it's so successful. In fact, it's the most successful automotive design in history. Believe it or not, so we all know that this was the symbol, a key symbol of the 1960s sort of revolutionary cultural movement that happened across the United States. Did you also know that this is the car that Adolf Hitler said, this is what I want in my Nazi Germany? That's kind of amazing that it can transcend these totally diametrically opposed ideals and have this human connection that transcends. So it ran from 1938 to 2003. It was a very successful design and ran mostly unchanged. So the reason why we love that is because we see ourselves, and when we see ourselves in a product, a service, some other thing, we see this personality. And that enables us to empathize. Again, that's that sort of API that lets us connect. Here's an interface that does that very well. Tapbots, which these are iPhone applications. They created a number of them. Here are two of them. There's this ConvertBot and WeightBot. So WeightBot helps you track your weight. ConvertBot just converts units. So if you think, these are amazingly successful applications, really super successful. I don't know how much they've made off of this, but you know, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. People are really excited about these. But what's interesting about these is that they work much like the Volkswagen Beetle does, that we see a face that's present here, that there's sort of a subtle anthropomorphization. Whether you see it, you know, you're cognizant of it, you recognize the face right there or not, it doesn't really matter. I see in this one, because I'm a child of the 80s, I see Kool Moe Dee with his glasses right there. But it doesn't matter whether or not you see that face. Your subconscious will recognize it. It sees a person that's present. In fact, these are inspired by Wall-E, the movie, that little robot. That was kind of an inspiration. And Wall-E is a robot that is all about humanity and personality and emotional connection. People love these apps. Case in point, John Gruber of the famous Daring Fireball. I adore the way their apps look and sound. He didn't say, I like watching my weight with WeightBot. It's great converting units with ConvertBot. He says, I adore it. I adore it. That is a term of endearment, that he feels an emotional connection to these applications that makes him want to tell the world about these apps. And if John Gruber tells other people about your iPhone app, you're in good shape. So I talked to Mark Jardine, who's the designer of TapBots, to get a little insight about the design thinking behind these apps. He said, we did want our users to have an emotional connection to our apps. Most people don't have a love, joy for software like geeks do. It's true. I know it hurts us a little bit inside to think that other people don't love technology the way we do, but it's very true. I think that's a key reason why they're so successful. Aarron Balkan, who you're going to be hearing from later on in the conference, made a really interesting iPhone app. It's a Twitter client that helps you basically customize your tweets and do lots of interesting ASCII art and stuff. It's called Feathers. You can find it in iTunes Store. What's interesting about this is there's this sort of this cute face of this bird here, and as you type, the little birdie starts to fill up, green, 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 until you've typed too much, and he turns red. So two things are happening here. One, Aarron's designed following Jacob Nielsen's principle that we should offer system status. Tell people what's happening inside the application so they can react accordingly, shape their behavior. But it's also creating this cute emotional bond here with the audience that that bird is cute. And cuteness, I think that, you know, our cerebral cortex, our thinking side, we say, cute, that's not something I'm all that interested in. But it's actually something that we're evolutionary programmed, all of us are programmed to respond to. Believe it or not, Stephen Jay Gould has done a lot of interesting research from the 50s and 60s that cuteness is a baby's defense against getting eaten or killed by their parents. Who'd have thunk it? That's bizarre. So they come out cute, and we think they're cute, and therefore we want to hug them and nurture them and so forth. So cuteness inside of an interface, if we know a little bit about the way our brains work, we can use that to hack people's brains and get this emotional connection. What do people think about this? I found this very fascinating, this tweet from a customer. Confession, sometimes I make too long Feathers tweets just to watch the bird turn red. She's intentionally making a mistake because she likes that interaction pattern that's happening. That's really powerful. That's a really powerful connection. So Aarron and I were talking about this app, and he said, before your application can create an emotional relationship with the user, it must get the basics right. The emotional relationship, the delight, is what you layer on top of this base, usability and technical competency. That is Maslow's hierarchy of needs mapped over to interface design. It's reliable, it's functional, it's usable, and then it becomes pleasurable, and people love it. Back to Wufoo. So Wufoo has personality laced into their application in many ways. So ways that you can create this emotional engagement are vast. So Wufoo uses design, this aesthetic that's it's very kind of, as I said earlier, Fisher-Price or kindergarten is it's youthful. These primary colors. They also, in the copy, you know, like it says, "This is my form. Please fill it out." It's awesome. So they pardon me, I'm losing my mic here. They use the copy as well to make this emotionally engaging and let this personality come through. So Kevin Hale of Wufoo, here's what he had to say about what they have done with their design. He said, the inspiration for our color palette did come from our competitors. It was really depressing to see so much software designed to remind people they're making databases in a windowless office. And so we immediately knew we wanted to go in the opposite direction. What's interesting about what Kevin is saying is that he has an emotional profile in his brain. We create personas. You guys are familiar with personas. You do user research and you learn about your audience. And then personas are the artifacts of that research, basically creating these archetypal representations of the user you're designing for. But he's thinking not just about demographics. He's thinking about the emotional state of his user. So namely that they're sitting in a cubicle in this really depressing office environment. And if they could create something that is emotionally engaging, that's fun, they could change the course of the person's day, that a little treat can make that really fun. Treats. How do we use them? I want to share with you kind of School of Hard Knocks and the things I've learned working at MailChimp. So I'm the UX lead there. I've been working there for about 3 years, and we have a small team of people, and we've been given lots of leeway, that there's a lot of personality that's built into the application and the brand, and lots of leeway to play with that and experiment. And one experiment in particular I've found really fascinating to see the results. So at the top of all of the main pages is Freddie von Chimpenheimer IV. He's this funny little chimp that was illustrated by John Hicks. And he says something like this: "Why am I smiling, you ask? Because I'm not wearing any pants." So that's what's behind that interface there. So if you saw that and you found it funny, great. If you didn't, it's okay. He's not giving you information about the application performance, like you've got 2 campaigns to send out. He's not doing that. It's a little joke up at the top, and it's out of the way of the workflow. It's kind of a little treat that's built into the interface as you go. So some of the things we've learned from this experiment is, so here's a tweet: "Oh, MailChimp monkey, just as I get frustrated with wrangling email addresses, you're there with your little witticisms to cheer you up." So it has an interesting effect that in points where someone might have a challenging task or a tedious task, something that might be repetitive, these sorts of little treats that are layered in make that experience more enjoyable, and the perception is that it's more usable as well. So obviously we work very hard on usability, but these emotional treats that are layered in make a more usable experience as well. People like these so much that they start posting to Flickr. So they collect them, post them up there, tell everybody about them. Blogs, they collect them all, put them up on blog posts and start to talk about them. What is interesting about this is that these are working a lot like classical conditioning. If you're familiar with the experiments of Ivan Pavlov from 1910, he won the Nobel Prize for those experiments he did with the dogs, where he'd show the food, ring the bell, and the dogs would salivate, and then he could just ring the bell and dogs would salivate. So any sort of stimulus can trigger certain behaviors after a while. So these little treats that are laced throughout the application out of the way are actually shaping the tone of the relationship that people have with the application. Here's the thing that blew me away, is that when people come into live chat to get support, they're throwing the monkey jokes back at us. Because they see that in the application over and over again, and they feel like, this is fun. These people are I can crack a joke with them, and it will be okay. So the support experience actually becomes better for the customer as well, and for our support team, they obviously like that better. They like to be able to make funny jokes and crack jokes with our customers rather than having to fight customers. So this conditioning, training people to have this positive tone when interacting is pretty great. Jason Baird, who's on our UX team, we were talking about this, and he said, yeah, this is kind of like the magic 8-ball, where you shake the magic 8-ball and you say, does Julie really like me? Signs point to yes. And you basically read into that, yeah, Julie is madly in love with you. You're basically interjecting, you're sort of layering over your meaning on top of that, question, that response. And people do this. So there's actually one little greeting that says, hey Bob, new haircut, muy guapo. So do I know if someone actually has a haircut? Just got a haircut? No. But check this out. Whoa, I just logged into MailChimp and the little monkey in the corner says, hey Kate, new haircut, muy guapo. How do they know? We don't. We don't. We played the odds. But the result is this person thinks there's a human being behind the interface that is doing something, that's talking directly to them. That's kind of amazing. So it's not going to work in all situations, but the situations where it does, very powerful. What we found, I've done a lot of research around this, but these emotional experiences, the limbic system in your brain where the emotion happens, is right next to your long-term memory. And isn't that convenient? We're programmed that way that if you have an emotional experience, you want to have a long-term memory about it so you can go back to that thing if it was very positive or stay away from it if it's negative. And in this case, we're imprinting on a user's brain a long-term positive memory to help them love the brand. Discovery is another tool. This is something that we've also experimented with at MailChimp. So, we do these login screens. Google does really fun ones as well. The Pac-Man one they did was amazing. So here's Freddie von Chimpenheimer IV as Dracula. There he is as Pilgrim. I hope I didn't spoil this is what it might look like on Thanksgiving coming up. Hopefully we've got a new one. Winter, when winter comes around, he's sort of like this Bing Crosby-esque White Christmas sort of stocking cap guy. To commemorate A.A. Milne, the author of the Winnie the Pooh books, one of our designers did a watercolor and made that into a login. And the net result of this, the collective outcry on Twitter was, ah. This is my favorite. May 4th is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Luckily, we did not get our asses sued by George Lucas for this. I was really, really nervous about that, but definitely cool. We actually made T-shirts out of this one. It was so fun. So we also, as part of Discovery, we lace in Easter eggs that have been fun as well. This is one, there's when you want to preview an email, it's kind of a little pop-up window that comes up where you can kind of see and gauge the widths to make sure it's going to work in different clients and stuff. And as you stretch that, stretch the pop-up window, if you watch this, there's Freddie at the top with his arm out, kind of showing you how wide it is. If you go too far, you can rip his arm off and he shoots blood everywhere. We found UK audiences tend to like that joke a little bit better than most. But it's the sort of thing, like, if you found it fantastic, you just had a great experience that, again, this pops up on Twitter a lot. It's not marketing. It's just us having fun and letting our personalities show through. But it turns out to, it encourages people to evangelize. There's another site that's doing some really cool stuff with emotional engagement. Photo Jojo, have you guys seen this? If you're a photography guy or girl. They have a lot of interesting stuff. So I'm going to have to replay this video because it's running already. But I don't know if you just saw, if you click Add to Cart, let's rewind this here. So what's going to happen is when you click Add to Cart, the sad little cart who's gray with a sad face is going to smile and turn green. So here goes. Clicking Add to Cart. Oh, there's our sad cart up there. I don't have any items. Click Add to Cart. Bloop. Oh, he's happy now. When you see that, what do you want to do? I want to put some more stuff in there. What's he going to do next? This lever, it says do not pull. What are you going to do, right? You pull that lever, and what happens is this giant Muppet arm from outer space drops down and yanks the page up and pulls down to the description. Really fascinating. I mean, they could have had a link to view description. That would have worked just fine. Would have been totally functional and usable. But that pleasurable layer is very powerful. And here's what's interesting about that, is that Amit Gupta, who's the guy behind that runs Photo Jojo, he said that the stats on conversion of people that click the do not pull lever are substantially higher. So if you click that do not pull lever, you're more likely to buy. It could be that you are viewing in the description and learning more. My hypothesis is that it has more to do with that positive experience, that if you just made me chuckle, you've disarmed me, and you say, well, wow, that was great. What the hell? I'm going to buy this. This is cool. And that sounds like, well, can that be true? Is that scientifically possible? And it is. I mean, when you change that tone in a person's brain, you can basically kind of shape a behavior and increase the odds that they'll go down the path that you want them to. So an interesting thing about humans is that we have doubts. We're skeptical, which is a big part of that cost-benefit analysis. We're worried about what's going to hurt us. And that's something that we have to overcome as interface designers. Case in point, Mint.com, which aggregates all your financial information into one place. If you're an interface designer, that's a scary thing. That's a tough hurdle to overcome. How do I convince someone to give me their sensitive financial information? And what they did was, they're not using humor. Obviously, humor would be a big problem to get people on board, right? But they create this sense of trust through really stellar, tight design. So the design is so interesting and compelling that when people see that, the subconscious inference is that, well, if it's designed this well, it's got to be built very well also. There's also a sense of curiosity, like, this is really cool. I wonder what my data would look like in this interface. That kind of pulls people in. Jason Patorti is the interface designer that did Mint.com. And he said, trust was the most critical barrier for us to overcome with potential users. It was an uphill battle raising venture capital because investors simply didn't think people would ever share bank credentials. They couldn't get funding at first because this was such a critical issue. And so Jason goes on to say, trust is a gut feeling more than a rational process, and visual design affects emotions in a very powerful way, perhaps more than any other stimuli. And again, that just goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, that we operate on gut, that emotion is that center point of our decision making. When we look at something like this, if we think about ourselves, we like to say, oh, I'm going to use logic to make a decision whether or not to use this service. But it's not. It's your gut feeling about whether or not this is going to work. You boil that down to kind of a simple cost-benefit analysis, and you make your decision. So this is something that I found very interesting about emotional design, is that it buys you forgiveness. Case in point, Flickr.com in 2006 had a major outage. In fact, they thought they might have lost everyone's data. That would be devastating, obviously, for Flickr. That would be close the doors, turn out the lights. They put out this page while they were trying to troubleshoot and get things figured out that said, our tubes are clogged. And basically it says, if you print this page and do something creative with it, post that back to Flickr when we come back up, you could win a free pro account. So it worked much like a child that's sort of fussy on an airplane, and you give them some shiny toy to play with, and like, oh, nice. And they sort of start to behave. So people started to, I mean, what do you do when you encounter a challenge like this? I mean, I would put my stormtrooper costume on and draw some Death Stars. And of course, someone's got to put their weed in it. I wonder when he posted this if it was geotagged. So the way this worked is it created emotional collateral. When you've rewarded me, when you've gone through that trust cycle that we talked about earlier, I've got this connection with you. And so when something goes bad, when the shit hits the fan, I am going to do that cost-benefit analysis, and I'm going to say, is what I've gotten out of this worth more to me than what I've just lost? And if you've got that emotional collateral, chances are people are going to say, yeah, it's worth it. I'm going to stick around. This is your ace in the hole. People have limits, and we're very aware about the limits that our users have. We know that attention is finite, that people cannot pay attention to everything. And so we have to keep that in mind when we design. Not to pick on CSS Drive, I just sort of ran across this and felt like it illustrated the point, but this page has a lot of stuff going on that's asking for my attention. And it's a lot of noise, and I'm not sure where to focus. There are all these screenshots and lots of copy with bright colors and texture and so forth and ads. So that whole the way our brain works, that gestalt, boiling it down to make a quick decision, it basically fails. That we cannot look at that and boil it down to a simple decision point. So we follow this principle called Occam's razor, that if you've got a series of choices to choose from, the simplest option is always the best. Case in point, Tumblr.com. Their homepage is so dead simple. The call to action is very simple. It's just, here's the form, here's what you should do. So when a person sees this, it's very clear what you're asking them to do. They know what you want them to do to sign up for this form. Now, they can go elsewhere and discover information and do some research about the service and so forth, but the simplicity helps people make that decision, makes that gut reaction very easy. I found this quote from Donald Norman. I found this really fascinating, that he said that attractive things make people feel good, which in turn makes them think more creatively. How does that make something easier to use? Simple. By making it easier for people to find solutions to the problems they encounter. So if we don't overload, if we know how people search for patterns and we don't overload their brain with lots of processes to sort through, they can actually be more creative and they can think through a process a lot easier, like with Tumblr. And so you can get better conversion rates with stuff like that. We often characterize our users as lazy, like they don't want to read, they don't want to do a particular action or so forth, but really what people are doing is looking for the path of least resistance. They're trying not to do a lot of extra work because that would be impractical if we went through life taking the most difficult pathway. So if you find yourself in that situation, we can use this handy little tool, which is bribery. It works in politics and it'll work in interface design. Dropbox has a lovely example of this. Dropbox, when you start their service, they have a hurdle to overcome. They need to get you invested in their service, get you to download their software, start sharing files, get things set up, and so forth. But they know that there's a certain barrier, that takes some time investment. So they say, all right, we're going to give you 250 megabytes of free space if you just complete a series of tasks. Go in any order you want. And they have this nice little meter on the side, like you're getting closer, you're almost there to your free space. And you finally get there, bum-ba-da, 250 megs free. So what they've done is they've just made you feel good, like, oh, wow, I just achieved something. It's almost, it's the same thing that happens with video games, this sense of achievement and reward. They just tricked you into getting invested in their service, and now you're less likely to stop using it. You're also, because you feel good, you're more likely to tell your friends about how great this experience is already. So this brings us to risk. As I alluded to earlier, there is a certain risk to putting your personality into a brand that can get you potentially in trouble with certain people. We've experimented with that at MailChimp. We found some party poopers, some people that don't think that Freddie's funny. They want to turn him off. They don't want to see the funny copy. They want just all business, and that's okay. We've actually found that this personality that's present helps us weed out the people that we really we might not be the best fit with. It's not that we want to turn away their business. It's just we feel like we're probably not the best fit. That is as powerful a thing as connecting with people as well. It's not just about making a strong bond with an audience, but it's also making sure it's the right audience for you. So we created this party pooper mode. It's a checkbox in the settings where you can say, I don't want any fun. Only 0.007% people want to poop on the party. That's pretty fascinating, that when people are given the option to turn off the fun, almost everybody sticks with the fun. That's very powerful. So that's a number we watch very carefully to see, to monitor, where are we? Where's that line? Have we gone across that line into something that's a little bit too goofy or too, inappropriate? So the way to think about emotional design is that we can progressively enhance our interfaces. So don't get in the way of reliability, functionality, and usability. Enhance that experience with that top layer of pleasure and delight. So just kind of keeping this model in the back of your brain as you're designing. And you can start small. I want to just leave you with a quick example here. Coffee Cup Software did something really clever. They did this little egg experiment, an Easter egg hunt. Find Easter eggs in their website, and you can win cash and prizes. So here are some eggs nested in the site. Bum-ba-dum, there they are. And if you find one, you can claim it and you win something. People went nuts for this thing. In fact, it took their servers down. When they got their servers back up, they got a 600% increase in page views, 300% increase in traffic, and 217% Facebook fans increase, and 170% Twitter follower increase. So this was a temporary thing that they did that created just a huge buzz around their product and service. And take a look at what some of the people were saying. Just can't let it go. Into my third day now. Ashamed of how many hours I've spent. Third day. When's the last time you've had someone on your website for 3 days? So pleased to have found this software. I've wanted it for a while and was saving up. Now I can treat myself to some of the other software I've been trying during my 5-hour egg hunt. Do these people really have jobs, I wonder? So to conclude, I wonder, have we changed as humans? Back to this whole life cycle of here we are 100 years later after the arts and crafts battle with the Bauhaus and the machine age. And now we're in this social age where we're starting to connect with one another more. I don't think that we're necessarily changing. I think that we're allowing our personalities to come through, and that changes our expectations from the products and services that we are using. And we're allowing ourselves to become more human, and therefore the things that we design and put out into the world should also become more human. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thanks.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions.
Yeah.
See, I told you that would change your attitude towards design, and Aarron has introduced a kind of whole layer that it just is so inspiring, isn't it? It's brilliant stuff. So, you've got a choice now. Choice number 1 is to stay in here and talk about running a successful web design business. Choice number 2 is to go to stage 2, where you can get an HTML masterclass.